In 2026, the average 45-year-old is supposed to be at the peak of adulthood. Peak income. Peaks. When most people were 18, they imagined 45 would feel rich. Not billionaire rich. Just comfortable. So where does the average 45-year-old actually stand in 2026? Depending on the survey, retirement savings for Americans, because here's the hidden mechanism nobody warned people about. Inflation doesn't destroy your money all at once. It quietly, and this is where things become psychologically dangerous. Because everyone online looks rich. At 45, then there's retirement itself. The concept sounds simple. Work for decades. Save consistently. Eventually stop working. But in 2026, retirement stopped being an age and became a math problem. Because people are living longer than previous generations. Which sounds wonderful, until you realize longer life also means longer financial responsibility. A person retiring at 65 may need enough money to survive another 25 or even 30 years. That's not a short ending phase of life anymore. That's an entirely separate chapter. Healthcare costs continue rising. Housing costs remain unpredictable. Inflation keeps moving in the background like invisible gravity. And suddenly retirement savings that once sounded enormous start looking smaller under real-world pressure. This is why many people at 45 feel behind even if they technically saved more money than their parents did. Because the future itself became more expensive. Over the last decade, one financial divide became impossible to ignore. The gap between people who owned appreciating assets and people who relied only on wages. Asset owners benefited from rising markets. Stocks climbed. Real estate exploded in value. Businesses expanded. Meanwhile, ordinary workers experienced a different reality. Their salaries increased slowly while the price of assets accelerated much faster. And this created a strange economic feeling. People worked harder than ever, but still felt farther away from wealth. Because wealth increasingly came from ownership, not labor alone. That's one of the biggest psychological shocks many middle-aged adults experienced in recent years. Working full-time no longer guaranteed meaningful financial progress the way previous generations expected. By age 45, society quietly separates into different financial timelines. One person owns investments generating passive growth in the background. Another earns a high salary, but every dollar is already committed to expenses. Another is still recovering from layoffs, medical bills, failed businesses, divorce, or years of financial instability. Same age. Completely different realities. That's why broad financial averages often feel emotionally useless. Because being 45 today can mean almost anything financially. Some people are preparing for early retirement. Others are wondering if retirement will exist at all. And the strange part is, both groups can appear identical from the outside. That's modern middle age. A generation of people carrying invisible financial situations behind ordinary daily routines. One of the most dangerous financial traps is lifestyle inflation. Because people rarely feel richer immediately after earning more money. Instead, their obligations expand first. The apartment becomes a house. The reliable car becomes the expensive car. The simple lifestyle becomes layered with subscriptions, upgrades, memberships, and monthly payments. At first, these changes feel harmless. After all, higher income should allow higher comfort. But slowly, comfort transforms into dependency. And eventually many households discover something unsettling. Their lifestyle now requires continuous high income just to remain stable. That creates fragility. A layoff. A recession. A health issue. One bad year. Suddenly the entire financial structure starts wobbling. And many people don't fully realize how financially stretched they became until something interrupts the system. This is why retirement balances can feel strangely deceptive. A person might open their account and see several $100,000 saved. Objectively, that sounds impressive. But then future projections begin. Healthcare expenses. Housing costs. Longer lifespans. Inflation over decades. And the number suddenly stops feeling enormous. This creates one of the strangest emotional contradictions of modern finance. People can possess more money than previous generations ever imagined, while simultaneously feeling financially insecure. Because security isn't just about the amount of money anymore. It's about how long that money can survive inside an increasingly expensive system. And maybe this is the biggest shift happening quietly beneath the surface of modern society. Middle age no longer guarantees stability the way it once seemed to. For previous generations, 45 often represented ownership. Ownership of homes. Ownership of assets. Ownership of retirement timelines. Ownership of time itself. There was a widespread assumption that if you worked consistently for decades, life would eventually become less financially stressful. But for many people in 2026, the opposite happened. The responsibilities increased faster than the relief did. Today, many people at 45 feel less like owners and more like full-time managers. Managing debt. Managing rising costs. Managing uncertainty. Managing aging parents. Managing children who may need financial support longer than expected. Managing systems that seem to become more expensive every single year. The economy didn't collapse. That's what makes this situation so psychologically strange. Stores are open. Markets are functioning. Technology keeps improving. Luxury still exists everywhere. And yet beneath the surface, millions of financially functional adults quietly feel unstable. Not poor enough to stop participating. Not wealthy enough to relax. Just permanently calculating. That may become the defining emotional experience of the modern middle class. So how much should the average 45-year-old have in 2026? Enough to survive emergencies. Enough to survive inflation. Enough to survive recessions, layoffs, medical bills, and longer lifespans. But the uncomfortable reality is that this target keeps moving. Every year the finish line shifts slightly farther away. And maybe that's the real story beneath all the statistics and retirement charts. Not that everyone failed. Not that everyone is irresponsible. Not even that everyone is broke. But that the definition of doing okay quietly changed while millions of people were busy building their lives. For decades, middle age symbolized arrival. You worked hard when you were young, so life would eventually become calmer later. But today, many adults reach 45 and realize the pressure never really disappeared. It just evolved. The bills became larger. The risks became more complex. And the cost of staying financially stable became its own full-time responsibility. That's why so many people feel confused when they compare their lives to what they imagined adulthood would look like years earlier. Because from the outside, modern society still looks successful. But underneath that surface is an entire generation trying to maintain lifestyles inside an economy that keeps getting more expensive to stand still in. And maybe the most important question isn't how much money the average 45-year-old has saved. Maybe the real question is this. If financial stability now requires constant adaptation, constant planning, and constant optimization, then what exactly will retirement look like for the next generation? And more importantly, how many people are still quietly assuming things will somehow get easier later, the same way people believed when they were 18,